Hey, this is John. How are you today? I'm going to be working on weathering Tamiya's Spitfire Mk. I've got the model fully painted, decaled, and a second gloss coat over the top of the decals to protect them. I always seal in the decals because as I put on washes, if there's not a good seal over the decals, if there's any bubbles underneath them, the washes can get under there and it can create some really unsightly staining that can be difficult to deal with. So everything is ready to go, and I'll start adding a panel line wash. Normally on a build I'll use the same panel line wash across the whole model, but because of the sharp distinctions in color here on the bottom, I'm going to make a little bit of a change up. For the white areas, I'm going to be using this deep gray color. This is from Ammo, but the manufacturer doesn't really matter. It's an enamel wash. I'll be using that for the white areas. For the black areas, they've got this stone gray for black. It works with black, obviously, because it's a little lighter. It's not quite the color I want, but it's what I have. It's convenient, and I'll go with it, and it'll look fine. Maybe something a little lighter gray and maybe with a tinge of blue to it might be a little better, but this will work. And then on the top side, I'll use deep brown, which is what I normally use on most aircraft. I'm also starting to use, as this one runs out, I'm starting to use this Mk Productions dark wash. But anything on those darker upper colors that gives some contrast will work just fine. I've got my wash here in a pallet well, ready to go. I've also got some odorless thinner over here in this other pallet well. I use that occasionally if the wash isn't flowing nicely in some of the panel lines. I'll just give it a little coat of the odorless thinner, and that helps the wash to flow. It does thin it down some, so you have to often go back and give it another coat. But it will help with the flow. Now, I'm not a big fan of the very liberal application of just slopping it all on there and then wiping it away. That takes a lot of work and can leave a lot of stains. If that's the look you're going for, then, you know, go for it. But I tend to, and this one I want it to be a little cleaner. I'm going to weather it lightly. I'm not going to weather it heavily, so I don't want a lot of that tinting and streaking and staining that can come with using a lot of wash. So let me get my Optivisor in place here so I can see what I'm doing. I just come in and begin touching it to the panel lines. Now I'm having to work at a little bit of an awkward angle because of the camera. Normally I would have this right up at my face so I could see it. So pardon the handshake. My hands, they shake quite a bit actually, but I live with it. But I go through and I just add this in fairly neatly. Takes a little longer to do it this way. The slop it on method is a little faster, but this is much easier to clean up. So I go through and I hit all the panel lines, and sometimes it'll run along nicely, sometimes it won't. I tend to go lighter on my gloss coats, just because I don't want them to build up. Now when you've got areas of these little rivet details like that, don't forget to hit those with a little spot, just like that. And if your wash has been in the jar for a while and it's getting a little thick, just add some thinner to it, and that'll get it flowing pretty well. This is actually one of my favorite parts of building a model. Not because it's you know, because it's satisfying with the result, but it's just a real quiet, peaceful part of it. It's not impossible to mess up, but it's kind of hard to mess up. And so I kind of like it. I can just sit and do it. Now, earlier I talked about adding a little bit of odorless thinner. Let me show you that. All I do here is I come in, and here I'm fairly liberal with the application because it's clear, it doesn't matter as much. And I'll just put that over this section here, and I just wipe it on and let it go into the recesses, or recesses, depending on how you say it. And I'll give it a good coat. And then I can come in with my wash again. And it flows. It's hard, I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but it just flows a little better. These are very petite panel lines. The shallower the panel line, the slower the flow. So this extra coating can help. And you'll see as I go further along, I'm getting a little sloppier. I get a little impatient sometimes. But that's all I'm doing, is I'm putting it on in that fashion, working across the whole wing, getting the landing gear area, the landing gear struts, all of that. And I'll do the silver and all of that. But I'll continue like this, and then I'll just wait till I get this wing done, and once it's done, I'll show you cleaning that up and getting on to the other sections. Okay, I've added all the panel line wash that I want to the white part of the wing, and just a few things to point out here. You'll notice as I got further along, I got a little sloppier. I started speeding up, so things got a little sloppier. In the wheel wells, I went ahead and slopped it in there pretty good. I smeared it all around because that area would have gotten a little dirtier. And I'm going to dirty up some of this area here too later on. But that area would have gotten dirtier. So I'm okay if there's a lot more wash in there, if it stains it, because I'll show you when I clean it up how to take advantage of that extra wash. Way down in here, in this part right here, it's hard to clean up in there. So I just slopped it in there. And again, I'll show you how I just kind of swirl it around a little with a brush. And then I also went quite heavy on this part of the landing gear so that it would, again, like the wheel wells, it'd be a little more stained and hopefully a little more realistic. But now I'll go through and I'll clean this up, and we'll see what it looks like. I'll show you that in just a second. All right, I've given this a little time to dry, probably about 10 minutes. It doesn't take a lot of time to get to a working state if you put it on fairly thin. That's another reason I like putting it on fairly thin, is that I don't have to wait a long time for a huge slop of the stuff to dry. Now for the larger areas of the wing or the fuselage or whatever, I just get a piece of paper towel folded up like this, and I just start gently wiping it back. And like you'll notice where that wash was a little heavier there, it leaves a little stain. I always make a decision at this point, do I want to leave that there or not? Now I tend to do this in one pass. I don't really bear down on it, but I tend to just do it in one pass and see what I can get up and see what I'm left with. Now I kind of like that staining right there, but it's a little more stained in some of the other areas than I want. So I'll go back in a little heavier, and this time I'll go back and forth just to clean that up a little more. And if you've got a good gloss coat down, this stuff will come up fairly easily that's on the surface. I used Future for the gloss coat, but any gloss coat works fine. Acrylic gloss coat, you definitely want to use an acrylic gloss coat underneath this enamel-based product. But I just continue like that. And then in these tighter areas, I grab an old cotton bud and I start pulling that back. Now you see that stained up quite a bit. See the stuff that came off? But that's okay, because this area on Spitfires, they got a little dirtier from the the oil stains coming out of the engine. So I'll let that stay a little bit. And I'll clean back here behind the radiator. But I just continue that process of cleanup. And then in here, I'm just going to be a little more loose about it. I'm not going to try and get all that stuff up. Like I said, I want to introduce a little more staining there. Same way with the landing gear doors and the struts. I'll just lightly clean those off. Clean up those bolt areas. Now, once I've done that, if there's any additional areas that I'm not happy with, I'll get a clean brush and dip a little bit of it in odorless thinner. And like this area right here, there's a little more stain there than I want. So I'm going to offload a little bit of that on there, and I'm just going to go in here and I'm just going to begin blending that in a little bit, just to work it in, reduce it a little bit, thin it up some. And I'm okay if it leaves a little more of a stain there, because what I'm wanting is, I want it to look like it's, you know, used and worn and collect some grime, which it does, but I don't want it to look like leftover wash. So any excess I'm kind of pushing into the middle of it, and when I get it like I want visually, I just go in with a Q-tip and clean up that excess right there. And that looks pretty good to me. So using a brush and some odorless thinner, you can do a lot of cleanup. Another little trick I like doing is in the wheel well there. I don't know if you can see that staining right in there, but I like to go in and just dab in some of the thinner to try and create little random patterns of dirt and clean. And it just, I think it just makes it look a little more alive. It's not a huge difference, and you could work this a lot more. You could come back later and add additional stains and things, but by working it around a little like that, it just changes the appearance just a little bit, and hopefully would make it look good for, you know, somebody looking at it. So I'll continue doing this process on the rest of the underside of the model, and then come back and look at doing the uppers, which will have a few things to note there. Okay, here's a brief product note, and just to note that sometimes you have to switch streams in the middle of a build. I was using this stone gray for black to do the panel lines here on the black part of the wing, and there's just not enough contrast. I've used this before and I liked it before. I'm not quite sure why it's different. It's maybe my eye has changed. But what I'm going to do is use another compatible product so that I can go right over this. But I'm going to grab this oil brusher from Mk, medium gray, and I'm just going to put a little bit of it in my palette well, and I'll thin that down. It's a great sound, isn't it? I'll thin that down with some odorless thinner, and then just continue the wash process that way. It obviously doesn't have to be enamels, it can be oils, and the two can be mixed because they have a compatible thinner. So I'll switch up to that and see how it looks, but I just thought I'd point that out in case you're ever considering that wash. I'm not sure it's the best one for black in this case. All right, to keep things rolling along, I've got the undersides finished. Now I'm going to go in and do the top side with this PLW deep brown from Mk, and I'll do it the same way that I did on the underside, although when I apply it on the top side, I'll be a little more liberal with it be a little sloppier, just to introduce some streaking and some staining and things like that. So the process up top doesn't need to be quite as precise for what I'm going for with this model. But I'll get to work on that and show you what it looks like as I go. All right, I wanted to show the application here, and I was just a little sloppier with it. I didn't go whole hog, but where I determine how sloppy or how neat I want to be is how much wear that area is going to have. Over here closer to the wing root, that area is going to have more weathering, more wear. So I just was a little more liberal with how I applied it. As I got further out, I was a little tighter in the application. I also added a little more here along the aileron line because I want that to have a little bit of a shadow. So when I streak that back, I'll let a little bit of it stay in there to try and introduce a little more shadow. So that's the methodology I use. Now, if you're going for a dirtier look, you would add even more, maybe even just stain it across the wing. But that's how it looks at this stage. And I'll continue on across the model and get that cleaned up and show you how it looks. Okay, I have all the panel lining done and wiped off. It's looking pretty good to me. They're a little bit subtle, but I can punch them up a little later with some additional effects that I'm going to be doing. Got the undersides done, so I'll call that phase of it done. One thing to keep in mind, if there's any panel line areas that aren't holding the wash, or that you missed, or that aren't as intense as you want, you can go in with a mechanical pencil. You just sharpen the tip up, go in with a mechanical pencil, and you can fill it in a little bit, and it's a quick way to correct any places that you missed. Give a little extra intensity to it. Like I did this one line here to kind of show how much more intense the panel line can be as compared to the others. So if that's something you're looking for, a mechanical pencil is a great way to kind of enhance those panel lines. The next step is going to be to do some staining, and then hopefully in this video we'll be able to get in some airbrush fading also. All right, continuing on with the weathering, I want to do some staining on the underside of the Spitfire right here. Spitfires could get incredibly dirty and greasy and stainy in that area very quickly. So I really want to make sure I hit that area. I'm going to be using some Winsor & Newton raw umber to do this. I've got some on my palette here, and the way I like to do this is to simply grab a liner brush. This is just my cheap 25-cent. It's probably about a 0 size brush, somewhere between a liner and a round. And I'm just going to start introducing, and this is full undiluted, unthinned paint here. I'm going to be streaking it, but I just want to introduce some stains here. There's a couple of little pits right here on the bottom, little holes that seem to have a lot of stains emanate from those also. They started just here at where the lower cowl and the wing join. There's a panel line there. So I like to hit that kind of heavy. And even though this area is black, I'm going to go ahead and put the staining there because it will to a certain degree show up, though it will be really hard to see. I put a fairly heavy blob right there, and you're going to see in a minute. I'm not kidding when I say this was a very stained up area. We're going to make kind of a mess here, but that's okay. All right, I'm going to start off with that. Now I'm going to get a little terpenoid, a little odorless thinner, put it on my palette, a paper towel off camera to unload it a little bit. And I'm going to take this wide flat brush. I'm going to offload most of the odorless thinner, and I'm going to start streaking this back. like this. It's kind of like a dot filter, but you're wanting it to go heavier. Now notice that as I'm pulling it back, I'm bringing it more towards the center line of the aircraft. Because airflow, while it would have pulled it a lot of it straight back, I want to have it kind of terminate like this. You'll notice my hands are shaking pretty bad this morning. That's just something I've had to deal with as I get older. Let me prop it up on that and it does a little better. Now I'm going to go back in, and in this area where I had the little hole, especially on this side where it can be seen, I'm going to put in a little more just to intensify that streak. Now I'll continue, and notice I'm using it not like this, but like this, because I want a lot of bristle against the oil, but not, it's hard for me to describe. This way I'm covering a wide area. I want it streaked. I want definite streaks. So doing it this way gives me a lot of bristles against it, the model, but not over a wide area so that it just starts looking like you just took a house brush and started pulling it along. Now what I do is I begin blending it and diluting it and just continuing like that. Then, forgot to get this, pardon the reach and getting off camera. I like to take some of these and start pulling it off, some of these cotton buds, and start pulling it off back where I've been streaking it. It's not that I don't want stains here, but I want to reduce the level of stain that's present so that I can continue pulling it back. Because if you just keep streaking these oils back, well, they'll just, I mean, you can just take it on back to the back of the aircraft and you could go on all day with this. Now this is just a foundation. This is not the final oil staining. It's just a foundation. And then sometimes what I'll do is start streaking it back the other way. You're pulling them this way and that way. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to start removing some oil. And just continue this process. I think I want to add a little more back in along here and here and right there. And then I'm going to grab a dry brush and just pull those back a little bit. Just to intensify it a little bit. And you see it starting to develop the stains. Now, in a few areas, like here, it doesn't look right. So all I've got to do is take another brush with some thinner on it and just clean that up. And like if I get along here where I don't want it, anywhere that it doesn't look like I want, essentially, I just pull that off. Oils are really easy to work with in this way. All right, so I'll give that some time to dry so that it gets set in place really well, and then I'll come back in and continue some additional oil staining. Okay, the model has had overnight to dry, and the stains, or the base, I guess you'd say the base of the stains, are looking pretty much like I want. I'll add more stuff to it once I give it a little more time to dry. What I want to do now is add just a little bit of staining along the wing, just so that it doesn't look so flat and monotone. What I'm going to use for this is some Starship Filth oil brushers from Mk. I'm not using this for any particular reason about the product. It's just a color I like, and it's what I have. If I had it in a tube, I'd use that. And what I do here, because I want it to be very restrained, is I get a little piece of wire. I don't even know if that'll show up, but it's a very small piece of wire. And then off camera, I've got some of this Starship Filth in a palette. And all I'm going to do is go in, make sure this is on camera. I'm going to go in and I'm just going to add very little bits of color, just very little spots along panel lines and areas that I think might get some kind of, see my hand jerk there? Sometimes that happens. But I'll go around and I'll add just spots of color like that. And then I'll get a soft brush. This one has seen better days. But I'll get a soft brush and I'll just start pulling that color back just a bit. To introduce some stains like that. See if I can remember every place that I put it. And then as I go along, I'll grab another brush. This is a 0 round, and I'll damp it in thinner, and I'll just start refining those little streaks just a little. And like there's just a little that's on the forward side of this panel line, so I'm just going to clean that up just a bit because I want it all aft of the panel line. And so I just continue this process, working my way around the wing, adding in just bits of streaks here and there, starting around the panel lines. This is a very subjective part of the work. You have to decide how dirty or how clean you want it. I'm very much a believer in the I'll know it when I see it method. All right, I'm gonna call that a wrap, I guess you'd say, to this video. I'll go ahead and finish the staining that I've just been talking about on the underside of the model. I'll do a little more of that, but everything else I'll do at this point on the underside of the model is a variation of these two techniques. So the next video will get into working on the top sides and the other ancillary parts, the props, the wheels, and things like that. We may be able to finish it up in the next video. It may take another one after that. We'll see. I want to make sure I keep within that half-hour deadline. But thank you for being a patron. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for supporting my work. It really makes all of this possible. And it's just truly a blessing to my family and I, so thank you. And I hope you're enjoying your modeling, and I hope this is contributing to your enjoyment of the hobby. And happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.